I love that we now have in Star Trek a species that vomits glitter. Amazing. Amazing. I'm surprised Lower Decks didn't give us that. Hello interwebs, I hope you are all doing well because I am here to review episode 5 of Star Trek Starfleet Academy, this one titled Series Acclamation Mill, I think is how you say it, aka Sam, because this episode is all about our girl Sam, and as per usual I will stay spoiler free up front and get into spoilers in the back end, but, spoiler free, this is going to be very, very difficult to talk about because I do not want to ruin what this episode is about. This is the episode that was written by Tonyie Newsome, who most of you out there will probably know as the actress who played Beckett Mariner over on Star Trek Lower Decks. But also, if you've ever listened to Tawny Newsome, she's done a bunch of podcasts, and I've had the chance to talk to her. She's done the Star Trek podcast as well. You know that she is a huge Trekkie. And not only that, she understands, or at least loves what I love about Star Trek, in that it's about, like, not seeing Star Trek as this perfect thing, but a thing that asks us to engage with thinking about the future and looking at ourselves and being critical of both Star Trek itself and also the messages and wanting to try to just do better. Like, she truly understands Star Trek. And also, on top of that, she's just a very funny, cool person, if you've ever had the chance to chat with her. So coming into this episode, I knew I was already primed to like it. But little did I know that I would walk away from this episode thinking it was one of the best, certainly one of the best modern Star Trek episodes that I have seen. And I mean, I'm going to sit with it for a while, but I think is one of the best Star Trek episodes. I think it's definitely in the running for one of my favorite Star Trek episodes. Again, I'll have to sit with that, but this episode is just so good. And it's going to be difficult to talk about this spoiler-free because I do not want to ruin what this episode is about, because to even say that, I think would ruin some of the fun of this. But not only does this episode capture Tawny's humor, it's very over the top, and it like gives us a really great insight into Sam the character in, I think, a really fun way, but it also does something, I think, truly special, and this episode had me crying at the end of it, as both a Trekkie and also for what this episode was trying to say and do. And it manages to mesh a love of Star Trek and a specific part of Star Trek with also a message of, a true Star Trek message of trusting in yourself and finding your own voice. And that meant so much to me. And the fact that it was doing this with a specific Star Trek thing that I love meant all the more. And every piece of this episode I frankly adored. Tawny's voice in this very much, it fits Sam perfectly. A bit chaotic, a bit on the autism spectrum coded, and also the expectations placed on her as the emissary of her people. I thought that, like, this episode managed to capture her voice and her energy and her fun, and yet the weight on her as well of being the person who's, like, trying to see how her people can reintegrate, the Photonics can reintegrate with the Federation after the Federation literally treated Photonics as servants, as we saw with the Doctor in Star Trek Voyager for many years. And that also becomes a textual conversation in this episode too, very briefly, which I really, really loved.
It's called Photons Be Free. It's quite provocative.
So I think this episode just really, really works well with Tawny's voice and capturing the character of Sam and really wrestling like with all the things that she wrestles with as a character. And I identified, just as a queer and trans person, identified with that so heavily as someone with expectations and wanting to find my own way within those expectations. And again, the Star Trekian element of this that comes into it, I really, really loved in a really beautiful way. Again, this episode had me in tears at the end. I expect to laugh and have fun with this episode. I did not expect to cry. This episode made me love this show. If this show can keep this up between last episode and this week's episode, if it can keep this, I know this is going to be wild to say. And I need to stress, I did not expect to like this show coming into this. I expected to, at the very least, just think the show is fine. But if this show can continue what it's done the last two episodes, this show could ultimately be one of my favorite Star Trek shows, right up there with Lower Decks in the modern era. And that is wild for me to say. Again, I want to stress, I did not expect this. This episode was frankly amazing, and if you looked at Star Trek Starfleet Academy and you're like, it's not a show for me, I totally understand. Even beyond, I know all the cultural bullshit that's going on in the show, I can understand, like, this show may just not be for everybody. It's not aimed at everybody. That's okay. If you are a Trekkie, you owe it to yourself to at least just watch this episode. If you don't watch the rest of the show, that's okay, I understand. But this episode you should watch. I also think you should watch episode 4, but this one in particular, please do yourself a favor. Just watch this one, and then if you want to watch the rest, awesome. If not, I understand. But this episode is just something special. And the show is continuing to show to me that this might actually be a special show. Not to say that I don't love all Star Trek shows. I love most of them. There's one in particular I'm not a huge fan of. But this is really great. With that said, I need to get into spoilers. So if you have not seen the episode yet, jump off here. All right, now that we're in spoilers, I have to just say this right up front. Holy crap, this is an episode dealing with the legacy of Deep Space Nine, but Benjamin Cisco in specific.
It's time to figure out what happened to Benjamin Cisco.
And I knew Tawny's always been talking about how she's a Deep Space Nine fan. And Deep Space Nine is my favorite show as well. I did not expect that this was going to be what she was going to be able to write. I am so glad that she got to write the show because she understands this legacy. Tawny Newsome getting to play Isla, the professor that sort of guides Sam through this episode. I'm like, Tawny, you wrote yourself into the episode. And then with the twist at the end, I'm like, Tawny, girl. It's a bit of fan fiction, isn't it? But we'll talk about that as we get there. But what I love about this is that this is an episode that is talking across generations, and Sam as a character is looking to find herself and find her voice and all this expectation placed upon her, and she is looking to a character like Cisco to learn from. And I think a lot of Star Trek fans, they look at the mystery of Benjamin Cisco, and they're like, oh, well, why didn't he return? Why didn't he come back? They want to know these factual answers. And that's what a lot of, like, I think in a lot of franchise storytelling we get caught up in is like, oh, we need to fill in the gaps. We need to know all this information. Like, all right, like what happened to this character afterwards? What happened to this character afterwards? But what this episode is doing, and what I love so much, it literally textually says, this is not about what specifically happened, solving the mystery of Benjamin Cisco. Like, what happened after Deep Space Nine? I need to know the answers. It's about what is the legacy? What did this show mean? What did this character mean? What did he stand for? And I think there's an element of this that I will try to touch upon, but it's something I cannot fully articulate as I am not part of it. But there's an element of this being very important to a Black experience. There's importance to Sam, the character, being a Black girl, seeking to understand and looking at Cisco. And specifically, especially the character of Cisco, being a character who, Avery Brooks, when he took this role, it was very important to him to showcase Benjamin Cisco not only being a role model as a Starfleet officer, but as a Black man and as a Black father, too. And he made a point of saying, like, so much depictions of Black fatherhood in media nowadays is Black fathers abandoning their kids. And I want to show a father who is tender, loving, and caring. And we saw that throughout so much of his interaction with Jake Cisco on the show. It's why the episode The Visitor is probably one of my top 5 favorite episodes of Star Trek, which is the episode where you have the older Jake. And there's the scene that Avery Brooks plays where, like, older Jake is just sleeping. You see Cisco just sitting there staring at his son sleeping. You see this love in his face and that tenderness. And it's so beautiful for any father, but specifically for Black fathers to get to see that depiction. It was really wonderful.
I'm glad to see you still in this house. You seemed happy here.
And for this episode to bring back Sirach Lofton as Jake Cisco to textually have that conversation and pass it down also to Sam and pass on these lessons within the Black community. There is an element of that there that, again, I cannot fully speak to, but I know is so important, that I know is probably meaningful to Tawny. I can't speak for her, but I'm sure that was an element of this that was very much a thought that she was putting into this as she was depicting Jake, and also passing this down to Sam. Having these people to look up to within the community. I do the same thing within the trans community, right? The trans elders that I look up to. And I think that was an absolutely beautiful thing here. Let's start talking some specifics, though. The opening of this episode, I've been getting very heavy. Opening of this episode is so much fun. I love that, again, Tawny's writing captures Sam, I think, really well, and getting into her unique way of seeing the world. But I also love the visual style of this episode. Star Trek, in a lot of ways, for a lot of its filmmaking, has felt very imprecise. This episode feels not just like the graphics on screen, but like some of the visuals that we've been seeing felt very precise and chosen. Actually, directors and cinematographers getting to have some specific cinematography instead of just constantly moving aesthetic, constant cameras like we've been getting a lot in Star Trek, sort of trying to ape J.J. Abrams' movie without understanding what made those movies work. Here, like, there's some really cool style, and I love getting inside her head. It's got that, like, Miss Marvel energy, but I think even more specific and more inventive than that, where we get to, like, see Sam, like, freezing time. Like, the visuals of it are really, really cool. Also, I should note, during the one sequence where she's like, people are running by her, don't think I didn't notice that Jaden was wearing a skirt. I love it. Finally, we're gonna see dudes in skirts. Like, let's normalize that more. One of the criticisms I had earlier on in the show is like, all the girls are in skirts, all the dudes are like, you know, pants. Like, it seems very like normative, gendered clothing. Now we're getting some dudes in skirts. Here for that. Love it. And I love how we set up Sam's journey here of like, you know, her photonics, right? Like, we understand, like, the photonic stuff of, like, they want to reintegrate with the Federation. But also the photonic, like, her makers come across as controlling parents of, like, you have an important job. You need to do these things. Here's everything you need to do. Like, that very controlling, dictative parents of, like, this is the person, the role that you need to fill and follow through. Like, this is your course, though. This is what you're doing. Like, all these expectations placed upon her.
Enroll immediately.
The semester's nearly over. Absolutely, right away.
And what I love about this is it manages to both feel like this is a story that is something that a lot of young people will relate to, the expectations that their parents have for them. And as a trans person, I heavily relate to that because of the expectations that were placed upon me to act like a boy by society and culture. So I relate to that as a queer person personally, but also it relates to the larger Star Trekian themes of how do we relate to our cultures, the expectations placed upon us by our cultures, the different ways that, you know, culture influences us. And I like that there is an added element here of the fact that the photonics are not just controlling parents, even though a lot of younger folks will relate to that, but also the fact that they have understandable fear of Starfleet and worries that the organics that used to enslave them might do so again. And so they are trying to reach out and integrate and have a connection, and maybe starting to see if that connection can be built, but that fear is also being placed upon Sam and putting these huge expectations on Sam to do exactly what they want so that they can understand and feel safe. So it's just a very complicated relationship that we get hints of, and yet we are only viewing it through Sam and how she feels about having to navigate all of these expectations placed upon her and this history placed upon her that she does not fully understand and can reconcile with. It's a very good understanding of something like intergenerational trauma, of how kids who are part of marginalized groups have to like learn the traumas that their elders may have, but they themselves have not experienced it and coming into fresh eyes, yet also have to exist within the institutions that harmed people like them. So really good conversations. And again, it's not incidental that she's a young black girl going through this. And if you look at a lot of, discussions within the black community of how many black parents have to like talk to their kids about being safe in a world that is systemically racist to black people. And so there's those elements of it. But then, Star Trek is about a future where Starfleet is trying to do better. In fact, the textual conversation of the show is Starfleet failed in the past during the burn, and also earlier on with that in terms of how it treated photonics, like the Doctor, who we'll talk about later on in this episode, but also wanting to try to do something new and try to be better, try to be a better institution. So I really, really like seeing all of that. And I think the theremin is such a really great metaphor that we get here in this episode, because it showcases that it's a choice that she made for herself, something that she made, and yet she doesn't really understand why she made it. And coming to understand that at the end of the episode of like why she connected with the theremin, why she made a preferential choice that had nothing to do with the expectations placed upon her, but something she related to, and coming to understand that is a really, really smart metaphor and relates to why she is seeking to understand the story of Cisco and why she initially sees the story of Cisco as something that she can factually solve.
You don't do well with ambiguity, do you? I'll tell you what. You solve this mystery, you can teach the class.
because she sort of sees things in absolutes and wants specific answers, when what she needs to come to understand is that there is no answer here, and that you need to come to understand yourself within all of these many different expectations placed upon you, something that Cisco obviously was dealing with in Deep Space Nine. And so I love this very complicated relationship that Sam is going through that is now being related through this really important character who I think is one of the most complicated characters within the Star Trek franchise, as well as something that is very important to the Black experience and Black history, especially within Star Trek itself. And I love as she's exploring all of this, like, she wants very specific. We get Tawny coming in as Isla, being like, this isn't something you solve, but Sam not understanding that. And wanting, like, very specific answers, not understanding faith and belief and intangible things. I also really love, like, learning the Bajoran, or Cisco's history through that, like, storybook. Those were really beautiful illustrations. That was really cool. And what I love most about this is teaching Deep Space Nine to, because most of the people, hopefully the audience watching this, the younger crowd, will not have watched Deep Space Nine. So this does a great job of letting you know what Cisco is without over-explaining it and letting, like, kids learn it. So I love that. I love this, like, it's good for if you've never seen Deep Space Nine, you can get into this, but there's also, like, a history here that the show is relating to. So loved that. And I really, really love Sam going to the Bajoran Club and trying and failing to engage with the Bajoran faith. One thing that I always really loved about Deep Space Nine was that it was one of the few science fiction shows that seemed to really want to try to understand and give respect to faith and religion. So often in science fiction, religion is just sort of something that is like, oh, it's the opiate of the masses. It's, it's something ridiculous and crazy, and it's usually just people trying to control others, whether it be godlike beings or, people in institutions that are just trying to control people. And certainly I think there is a worthwhile discussion on how religious institutions cause harm. But Deep Space Nine had this really great discussion that is very similar to the recent Knives Out movie, Wake Up Dead Man, where it discussed how people within religious institutions and people with power within religious institutions, like, say, Kai Wynn in Deep Space Nine, will use that to manipulate people and to control people. But faith itself is not an inherently evil thing, and it can create a beautiful sense of community, a beautiful sense of trying to understand yourself and the world and reach out to people. And that's what the Bajoran faith in Deep Space Nine did at its best when it wasn't being manipulated by someone like Kai Wynn. But it gave the Bajoran people a sense of identity and strength, especially during something like their Cardassian occupation, the fascist occupation by the Cardassians. And so for Sam to come into this Bajoran club, and she sort of calls it ridiculous nonsense because she doesn't understand something so intangible, not fact-based. It's her not being mean, but her disrespecting this culture based on simply the fact that it's something intangible that she doesn't understand. And I love that we go into Holly Hunter sort of not disciplining Sam, saying, like, you did a bad thing, but saying, look, I like that you're exploring this, and I like that you're asking questions, but the questions often reveal more about the person asking the questions. And Sam not really understanding that just yet, but talking about how much expectations she has placed upon her, and Holly Hunter encouraging Sam to explore that, I thought was really, really a beautiful, again, understanding of the importance of faith and, where Sam is at as a character, not being able to see things beyond black and white at this point in her life, considering she is only a few months old, technically. But also saying to Sam, like, most kids are asked to dream for themselves. You're being asked to dream for your whole world. You need to figure out who you are.
You're here to dream for your entire world. Some of our students come to Starfleet Academy to live out their own dreams. But you're dreaming us up, kid. You have to know who you are to do that.
And it's a similar thing that Tawny, Isla's character, says to her is about the tomato with Cisco. It's like, there's no right or wrong answer of whether you use tomato in your food, but Cisco made a choice, and it was a choice based on who he was.
You are not going to solve this mystery with facts alone. So if our choices determine who we are, what determines our choices? What we love.
That's not right or wrong, but it is a choice. And so you need to deal more with ambiguity and more from your own preference. And that's what Sam needs to understand, of like standing up for her own sense of self. And I really, really loved that. And I love her going to see the virtual museum, and there's so much done in the Cisco virtual museum that I really liked. I liked first that she learned that Cisco's fate was predetermined by the prophets, as we learned in the very ridiculous season 7 storyline where we learned that Cisco is a child of the prophets, so his whole life was sort of set up by the prophets. So Sam relates to that by feeling like, oh, like Cisco, do I even have a choice in my own destiny? Do I just have to follow what other people, my parents, my makers, determined for me?
His mother, Sarah, was both human and prophet. So his path was predetermined long before he was the emissary.
So, what, we just have to do what we're told? No matter what?
Again, relating to what a lot of kids will understand as like maybe overbearing, controlling parents and wanting to choose their own destiny, but also all the political ramifications of having to be someone who has to build this bridge between cultures. And then I really liked that she tries to speak to Cisco through the Bajoran orb, like asking for advice, seeking advice from, elders within, the Black community, metaphorically here, but textually just seeking advice from people who you relate to and look up to. But I really love, most especially, that she starts to learn about Cisco the person, not the emissary, through a hologram of Jake Cisco. And it was so amazing to see Sirach Lofton back in Star Trek. It was just, I'm so glad that he finally gets his chance to have his laurels here. But I like that he is talking about, in the hologram that she initially watches, what made Cisco a good father.
I knew a man who always championed me, especially in my writing. I know his recipes, his passions, and the example he set for me as a father, so that when I became a father myself, I was able to love my children.
Showing how Cisco was a father to Jake in the way that Sam wants her makers to be to her. Not a good emissary, but a good father, especially since depicting Black fatherhood in an empathetic, caring Black fatherhood, in a very tender Black fatherhood, was so important to Avery Brooks and what he wanted to do with Deep Space Nine. And I know Sirach Lofton, the actor, has spoken about personally what Avery Brooks, the actor, meant to him, not even the actor, the person meant to him, and how they had a really tender relationship on set, and how Avery Brooks defended him. There's this really wonderful story that I found in some of my research on Star Trek. Maybe not wonderful story, maybe that's the wrong word for it, but this very telling story where Sirach Lofton was on set one day and was, in the back of the lot, riding around on a bicycle, and a security guard on the Paramount lot came up to him and said, "Hey, what are you doing here? You need to leave." And Avery Brooks heard about it, came off the set, and said to the security guard, like, "No, this is inappropriate." Like, went to the people above the security guard and said, "This is absolutely not okay." And it sucks that someone like Avery Brooks, as a Black man, had to be that advocate for a young Black kid on the set. It should not have happened. But it also speaks to the importance of someone like Avery Brooks being that person who would look out for someone like Sirach Lofton, that he was that kind of guy. And he did so not just within the Black community, but if you look at some of the stories behind the scenes of Deep Space Nine, Avery Brooks often defended, like, queerness. Like, there's a famous story about how on the episode where Jadzia Dax, Terry Farrell, was playing a queer metaphor and kissed a woman on set. There was news paparazzi that wanted to be on set and be like, "Ooh, we're gonna do a news package about this really cool gay moment that Star Trek was doing." And Avery Brooks literally said no, because he was directing the episode. "No, I do not want to sensationalize this moment. I just want it to be natural. And so I'm not gonna have all these reporters on set sort of sensationalizing this moment, but just depicting gayness, queerness within the future of Star Trek as just a natural thing." Even though the story is, metaphorically about a taboo, the two women kissing should not be taboo, both within the universe of Star Trek or on set. And so this is the kind of advocate that Avery Brooks was. And I like that Sirach Lofton is here, getting to show that through this character of Jake Cisco, for his own father, and also relating that to Avery Brooks, especially since this episode is dedicated to Avery Brooks at the end of the episode, which I'll talk about later on. And him getting to say, like, you know, all of these things are probably what made him a great emissary, this, like, political ambassador between, you know, these two worlds of the Prophets and Bajorans and, you know, the rest of the galaxy. But at the end of the day, what made him a good emissary is what made him also a good father. This person who was kind, caring, and a human being who just loved to make food and care for people and bring people together and love people in a very tender way and love Jake. And I thought that was really, really beautiful and really powerful coming from not only the character of Jake Cisco, but also the character of Sirach Lofton. And then that being relayed to Sam, that Sam in this episode never gets a direct connection with Cisco himself. You know, we don't bring Avery Brooks back. Not that Avery Brooks, would have come back for the show. There's, that's a whole other conversation. But I almost think it's more powerful that Sam learns about Cisco not through Cisco himself, but through these people who knew him, as we'll sort of also reveal through Isla later on in Tawny Newsome's character. So I like that she sort of understands Cisco through the connections that he made and the people who he helped. And I thought that was really beautiful, and again speaks to this intergenerational passing down of, how we learn so much from those who came before us. And I think that is especially within marginalized communities, and I think that's just a very beautiful thing that we get to see depicted by her trying to speak to Cisco directly, but then learning about Cisco through the people who he affected, like Jake Cisco. And I really loved that. Again, showing Sam, like, she needs to understand who she is, but like how Jake related to his own father. And it's amazing to see Sirach Lofton back in Star Trek. So lovely to have him here. I also love, like, Sam kind of to get her friends to, like, taste food for her, but Sam wanting to have, like, a human experience, experience like getting drunk and being with friends, and Caleb trying to help her, but, like, fucking around with it a little bit. That was very fun. But then we get into them going to the Academy bar and having a cool, fun kids time, and Sam getting drunk was really, really good. Also, I'm going to mention this, and I'm going to email her and tell her how excited I am for her. The bartender in the episode was played by none other than Darius Rose, aka Jackie Cox, who many of you will know from her appearance in RuPaul's Drag Race, but I know because she appeared in my movie Identities, and I am friends with Jackie Cox, aka Darius Rose. Drag queen pronouns and names are always very confusing, but I was so excited to see her because I did not know. This is surprising to me. I did not know she was going to be in Starfleet Academy. Hell yes, she's a huge Trekkie, so it was really great to see her get a small little cameo in this episode. Also, more queerness in Star Trek. Hell yes. And speaking of queerness, let me pull back a little bit, because we also get this side storyline where we see the War colleges now having to share space with Starfleet Academy, and they're trying to divide literally the atrium and having an us versus them mentality of like, no, you are separate from us. We do not want to share anything with you. But in that opening, we see Kyle and Jaden talking to each other. It clearly is showing, as we later see in the bar sequences with Kyle clearly hitting on Jaden and calling him a bear, that they are actually both queer, both gay, and the show is textually showing them as gay. I'm like, oh my god, I love it. I love it so much. Like, casual queerness, casual being gay. Like, I loved it. It wasn't like, oh my god, look at these gay characters. The show never made a big deal of them being gay. They just are, and it happens, and it's sweet and adorable, and I love Kyle. He's so brief with God, but he's just a little boy. He's such a perfect little boy, even though he's in the war militant group. But I loved that. I loved that so much. And I did not intend to call this. I was joking a few episodes back when I was like, oh, I ship Jaden and Kyle. So I'm really glad that my gaydar is on point. But I also really like the subtle point that is made there in that earlier scene with the dividing line, that it's the two queer characters that don't give a shit about the us versus them distinctions. These two characters who are already outside the norm in terms of like what queerness is often seen as in our modern day culture are the ones that eschew these dividing lines and just cross it and are interested in each other. I think that's a really subtle but really important metaphor, that the two queer characters are the ones that don't really worry too much about the distinctions of us versus them. That was really cool. But also, I just love the fact that these two are gay for each other. Makes me very happy to finally have a Star Trek show that is not running away from queerness. Again, I'm looking at you, Strange New Worlds. But then this storyline extrapolates out into the storyline between Holly Hunter's Akka and the head of the War College, Kelrick, because we get the storyline where Akka goes to Kelrick, and I love the moment where she learns that he's heating a part of the ocean, or as he puts it, a small lagoon therein, which was a very funny little bit.
Sorry, am I reading this right? You're heating the ocean?
Just a small lagoon they're in. Now.
And Akka saying, hey, I can help you with this upcoming ceremony that you have. You just need to trust me. And it's her trying to break down this us versus them division lines that the students also have. And I like that it's Holly Hunter, the Starfleet character, trying to break down these divisions rather than the militant guy who sees things in absolutes, who does not trust her. He is always looking to defend himself, to see who the enemy is, where Starfleet's trying to break down these walls of us versus them. So I like that boils over, pun intended, into the discussion between the two adults. And then the whole sequence with them doing the ceremony with the Doctor and Jet Rita was so funny. But Kelrick, during this sequence, despite all the really funny comedy, ending up getting very defensive because he feels like the Starfleet teachers, including Holly Hunter, are making fun of him. And we learn that this is because he has a militant mindset and constantly sees people as in us versus them. If you're not with me, then you're against me. Even with people who are just trying to help him with a silly ceremony. He just does not know how to live in shades of gray. And just like Sam needs to break down seeing her world in absolutes, so too does Kelrick need to break down seeing the world in us versus them and in black and white. And he ultimately calls out Holly Hunter and says, oh, you abandoned Starfleet. You abandoned the institution.
You speak a great deal about trust for someone who abandoned Starfleet 15 years ago.
Is that why you never gave me a chance? You think I abandoned?
You did abandon it. Tell me something about Lanthanides, Nala. What's the point of such a long life if your memory is this short?
That's how he sees things. It's either you fall in line with the institution or you don't. And if you're not in line with the institution, that means you abandon the ideals. And I like that Holly Hunter comes to him later on and says, look, A, you need to trust me, but also understand that I didn't betray Starfleet. Just because I don't necessarily always believe in the institution and will sometimes push back against the institution does not mean that I don't believe in the institutions, though, that you can't trust me.
I understand why you feel I abandoned Starfleet. You've had to live in absolutes. But if you make a judgment without context, whether it's me or Chancellor Amal, you'll have a hell of a time getting people to trust you. Warrior cadets.
And I like this show pointing out the difference between absolute faith in institutions and faith more in the ideals of the institutions. And this is a really great theme that the show is constantly bringing up in multiple episodes this season. And I like that it's being presented here and used to deconstruct the militant mindset of Kelrick and the absolutist mindset of Kelrick. That also is mirroring what Sam is going through as well. It's a really, really beautiful parallel in the themes of this episode and also tying into the larger themes of the show. Again, I really just am loving Starfleet Academy being a show that is questioning the institutions and showcasing how characters fit in or push back or have to navigate trying to, reform or uphold institutions, but not doing what Strange New Worlds Season 3 constantly fucking does, which is say, oh, Starfleet is great because it's Starfleet.
What is Starfleet? It's the people. All of us. We make Starfleet what it is, not the other way around.
And just saying the institution is good just on the basis of it being an institution that we like. No, this is a show that is willing to question Starfleet even as it upholds its values, which is so beautiful. Also, I really like during the sequence that we learn a little bit more about Kelrick and what motivates him. Like, he is constantly worried about letting people down that he says he wants to protect. We sort of get that during the ceremony a little bit.
I fear letting down those I have sworn to protect.
So it's just like subtle character building of what motivates a character like him. He wants to protect people. He wants to care for people. And he needs to open up who he sees as needing to protect people from and who he is protecting and how to protect people, which is what I love Starfleet for, because it's not just about like protecting us. It's about trying to end fights to help others, everyone. But we do get to see a little bit more of who Kelrick is as well. It's just a really great way to distinguish what Starfleet is. Starfleet is not a militant organization that is just about protecting what's ours. It's about, expanding what it means to protect and how to protect and who we're protecting. In a true Starfleet kind of way, trust. Trust. Not us versus them, but trust. Love that. But then we wrap out the episode with Sam getting drunk and Shearer being, again, trying to, find herself as, I'm wanting to be my own person. I never get to do what she wants to do. And so that's why she, starts, the bar fight and all that jazz. Also, I love her mentioning the riots that Cisco started, obviously referring to the Bell riots. Love that.
Start riots.
Did Cisco start riots I don't know about?
And also calling Genesis was also very funny. But we get to the scene with Sam and the Doctor. And I love also we get the little mention of the Doctor saying he's disappointed in her and you have a lot to live up to, her connecting with the hologram part of him. But him also saying he never met the Cisco, but his creator, Dr. Zimmerman, did, which we know is true from the episode Dr. Bashir, I presume, the episode of Deep Space Nine, where Louis Zimmerman visited Deep Space Nine. So that was a nice little reference there. But I love the sense that Sam talks to the Doctor about loss, and the Doctor gets very pulled back. He's like, you get over it.
You can't just get over something like that.
You can. And you do.
And again, this is a little hint that I really like of how the Doctor has changed since his time on Voyager and Prodigy. Because now, having lived many lifetimes, he's experienced loss. He's watched the characters from Voyager probably all die. He watched Janeway die, Chakotay, all of them die. And he's had to keep going. And it doesn't make him a curmudgeonly dark person, but there's a wound there that I love seeing come out with the Doctor. Just briefly here. It's not overly emphasized. It's not like him making it didactic, but it's just a little bit you can see he's raw about it. But you still can have fun as we see throughout the rest of the episode. Again, very good nuanced and really good shades with his character that I really, really like. But this comes down to Sam going to Isla again. And Isla beautifully pointing out that Sam has learned a lot. That Sam just coming to understand that she doesn't need to see the world in the absolutes, that she needs to understand a little bit more about herself, has really started down a really great path. And the fact that Sam admits that she doesn't know the answers means that she's learned a lot. And I think that that's a really beautiful thing.
Emissaries who fail do too. Either way, you're doomed.
So, a lot. You learned a lot.
And I love that Isla shares with Sam the book that J. Cisco wrote and never released about Cisco. And that leading to this really beautiful scene between Jake and Sam. And I like that we don't get a textual explanation for it. That if this is just something that Sam is imagining in her own programming or head or whatever you want to call it, while reading the book, or if the book does this to a degree that it has some weird technology in it that Jake put himself into. It's in terms of a hologram sort of thing. I like that we don't get an actual specific answer here and that this is a more poetic thing. Sam relating to Jake Cisco and having a conversation with Jake through his artistic work. I really think that is a beautiful poetic idea, and I like that we don't get a one-for-one textual absolute explanation for it, and it's a much more spiritual connection that we get depicted here. Again, Sam learning to have faith, something that she clearly did not understand when she went to the Bajoran Club earlier on in the episode, and dealing with intangibles. And the conversation between Jake and Sam in this sort of ethereal space is beautiful for several different reasons. One, I love Jake telling Sam, you're amazing too. Just that moment of validation of her. Because she says, you're amazing. And it could be hero worship, but he puts it back on her and says, you're amazing too. I thought that was really beautiful. Small, beautiful thing of we see each other.
You're amazing.
So are you.
And I love the moment where, Jake explains a few different things. Cisco chose to do things his own way. Emissaries build bridges and they're important. And I know that that's a big role, but you have a lot of expectations on you. And the way Cisco did it is he did it in his own way. Sometimes he told the prophets to suck it. And he taught them as much taught them as much as they taught him.
You value your ignorance of what is to come.
That may be the most important thing to understand about humans. It is the unknown
that defines our existence.
And I like that he brings up the Cassidy thing about, like, you know, the prophets in season 7 of D69 said you shouldn't marry Cassidy. You'll know nothing but sorrow, and he did it anyways.
This was right before the prophets told him that if he married Cassidy, he would know nothing but sorrow. He thought about what they said and married her anyway. He did what the prophets needed, but he did it his way.
And so I love that idea of, like, Cisco may have had these expectations placed on him, and it's not necessarily saying he didn't want them. You know, he certainly had discomfort with it in earlier seasons of Deep Space Nine, but I think this is different than, like, you know, we have a controlling parent. And what I like about this is often with these stories, you see these elements of, like, oh, we're supposed to completely shed the expectations of our parents. Often in stories of trans people, right? For example, relating to myself, of, like, oh, our parents expect us to be a boy or whatever, and, you know, we wanted to come out and be ourselves, and, you know, you can have stories about, like, parents being, like, controlling and da-da-da, and, like, you know, screw you parents. And yes, if a parent's trying to tell you something to be something that you're not, you can say screw them. But at the same time, Sam doesn't seem like she wants to shed the role of emissary. It's not that she doesn't want that role for photonics, but she also doesn't like the expectation placed on her to do it a certain way, to try and live up to these expectations of who she has to be to do this role. And I love her saying to her parents later on, is like, this is about becoming. I need to be my own person. And that's what humans do. That's what organics do. But it's also what I need to do. And it's not that I don't want to be an emissary for you, but I need to do my own way to do it, find my own way through it. So I love that, and I love Jake saying that and relating that to Cisco.
My dad told me that so many times. I just wish I listened to him sooner.
But the other element of this that I also want to acknowledge here is Jake saying, like, I always knew he was with me. Even though he didn't come back, I always knew he was there with me.
You know all those things that you think he missed? He didn't. He was always there. He never really left us.
Because I think that addresses one of the big criticisms that people had of the ending of Deep Space Nine. Because as I said before, one of the big things that was important for Avery was that, like, he was a present black father. And the end of that show ends with, you know, Cassidy Yates being pregnant and then Cisco leaving to go join the Prophets.
I'm their emissary, and they still have a great deal for me to do. But first, there is much to learn.
But it leaves on this note of, like, he's leaving his kid and not going to be there as a father for his kid. And that was a big criticism of the show. I think rightfully so. But I like here that this episode reframes it in a really beautiful way of, like, no, he was always there. No matter what, I knew he was there. For me and for my sister and for Cassidy, like, he was there. And I love that because it reframes it and fixes that ending. It fixes that big criticism, or maybe what people had a problem with that ending. And I really like that. I love that reframing. And I think that's really, really beautiful to acknowledge here. And then I loved the final reveal of the episode, that Sam, the narration that we've been hearing from Sam the entire episode, was her speaking to Cisco, almost like a prayer to Cisco. Not knowing if he even hears her or if he'll answer, but just putting it out there in the world in faith. I thought was really beautiful, and just reframing the entire narration of the episode that we've been getting from Sam as just her kind of prayer to Cisco. And also the end reveal, too, that Isla is Dax.
Like the Dax? As in mentor to Cisco Dax?
And that was really great. I love that. It's so cool to see Dax around, and, like, they're able to carry on, Cisco's legacy in some way. I also really find it fascinating that Dax is now a biracial Cardassian Trill woman. Number one, it also should be mentioned that Tawny Newsome is herself biracial, but also just the fact that it's a Cardassian as well who is speaking about Cisco. There's just something really interesting there that, like, in the 32nd century, the Cardassians are just as, part of the story of Cisco and the history of Cisco as anyone else is. And Dax is also kind of integrated into that as well. So really beautiful idea. But I also have to say, Tawny, You made yourself Dax. Come on, that's some fan fiction bullshit. I mean, I'm not above it. I would have done that. If I had the opportunity, I would have done that shit. So, no shade, but man, girl, I see you. I see what you did. So that was really amazing reveal. But I love the episode ending on the lines from Avery Brooks, saying like love, like the only love can interpret these words.
Divine laws are simpler than human ones, which is why it takes a lifetime to be able to understand them. Only love can understand them.
It's not about like one way to see things. It's only love can understand these words. And I love that the dedication of this episode is for Avery. Because, you know, I think a lot of Star Trek fans who love Deep Space Nine have wanted in this era, like we've seen so much love for Voyager on shows like Prodigy and elsewhere. We've seen so much love for the Next Generation in like Picard, Star Trek Picard. Even the original series with Strange New Worlds. And while we've gotten little pieces of Deep Space Nine love, like that one episode on Lower Decks, it often feels a lot of the time like other Star Trek shows, even modern Star Trek shows, are cribbing from Deep Space Nine without honoring it. And the importance of the beauty of that show. I mean, Section 31 comes from Deep Space Nine, but it doesn't really acknowledge that connection. Star Trek Picard Season 3 literally steals the Changeling as the villain, but makes them like a Next Generation villain, and then discards them for the Borg in the final season. And I love that in this episode, there is a level of like, thank you. Thank you, Avery, for what you did on Deep Space Nine, on the show, and especially because Avery Brooks does not appear to be wanting to come back to Star Trek. He's off doing his own thing, which is fine. He has every right to do that. Like, he doesn't owe anyone anything or anyone to come back to this franchise. And I like that this is an episode that just says thank you. Thank you for what you did, what you meant. And I think, again, I can't speak for this community, but it seems like this is a thank you from the Black community. But even for me, as someone who watched Deep Space Nine, Deep Space Nine is my favorite Star Trek. And it is a Star Trek that taught me so much. Like, characters like Dax taught me how to be myself as a trans person, to feel fully myself, even though, I have maybe seen as another gender in my another life. I can be fully myself. And Deep Space Nine was a show about the queers, the weirdos, the outcasts of, all of the different societies, whether it be Starfleet or the Federation or, Cardassia or Bajor, and the wounds and the scars of the past. It was a show all about that and how those people still uphold the values, perhaps even more so than, the people on the flagship of the fleet. And that show means the world to me in so many ways. It is the Star Trek show that I love the most for that specific reason. And I really love that this episode captures that. It honors that. It does that from a unique perspective rooted in like Black community. But still also just points at all the beautiful things about Deep Space Nine that made it culturally specific, but also, they always say like the specific is universal. And this episode really captures that. And I really love this episode. Between this episode and episode 4, the last episode, Starfleet Academy has, I really love this show. It's 5 episodes in, and it can still screw it up. Like, maybe the rest of this season will be shitty and suck. Who the hell knows? But for these last 2 episodes alone, and especially this one, this show has captured my heart. I adore this show. It is so nice. It is so nice to be excited about Star Trek again. Especially live-action Star Trek. Like, I've had Lower Decks and Prodigy. I've loved both those shows, but live-action Star Trek has been very hit or miss, and more miss than hit lately. But it is nice right now to have a live-action Star Trek show that feels exciting, feels like I'm engaged, feels like it understands what I love about Star Trek, and it's not just the aesthetic of Star Trek. What a beautiful episode. What a fun episode, what a ridiculous episode, what an over-the-top episode, an episode that makes me feel joy for my friends. I've had the luck of, like, I don't know if Tawny would consider me a friend, but I've had the joy of talking to her several times, and she is absolute joy, and I adore her. And also, Darius Rose, who I adore him, Jackie Cox. I know how much of a Trekkie she is, and I'm so happy she got to be in Star Trek. And then this episode just itself, getting to be having visible queerness, having a conversation with Deep Space Nine. Like, this episode just does all the things, both on a personal level. Like, my friends are in it, and my friends wrote it, and it honors my favorite Deep Space Nine show. It shows me a community that I am not a part of, that I get to just take joy in seeing their joy. I get to find joy for myself. And it's just ridiculously fun and weird, and understands that Star Trek is about trust and love and caring. I love this episode so much. Oh my God. Just talking myself into it. This episode was so good, so beautiful, and amazing, and I really hope people see this one and understand it. Maybe it's just me. I'm recording these before any of these episodes go out, so maybe it'll just be me. But this episode means a lot to me. I love it. So, hell to the fuck yes. This episode brought me joy, and Starfleet Academy, I love you. I'm in. Yeah, you won me over, you bastards. I love it. What did you think, though? I'd love to hear all your thoughts down below. And thank you so much, everyone. Mwah. I might go rewatch this episode. Live long and prosper.